Lawrence Korb, who is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense and now a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. He is there in Washington, D.C. Hi again, Larry. So this military operation has come despite the UN Security Council saying very recently that there should be no foreign intervention there in Yemen.
There's no doubt about it. The Saudis are arguing that the legitimate government, the Haiti government, asked them to come in, and then they have a so-called GCC, coalition to protect the other countries in the region. No, I mean, there's no UN authorization for this at all, but the Saudis are arguing that they were asked to come in.
And do you think they really have thought through what might happen here?
That's what I wonder, because if the bombing doesn't achieve their objectives, what next? More bombing? How long will you continue? Will you do it like Libya, where the bombing lasted for 7 months before they actually, were able to get Gaddafi out? What will they do if the Houthis should send insurgents into Saudi Arabia? Will they be willing to put ground forces in? Hopefully, it's very easy to start a war, much more difficult to stop, and you should think about these things before you start. I think, as your previous guest pointed out, what they're hoping, this will have such a shock that the Houthis will be willing to negotiate with the Haiti government to come to some sort of power-sharing arrangement.
Do you think that'll happen? I mean, how long can the Houthis keep fighting?
Well, again, that's going to be an interesting question, because I think this is the last thing they thought about. They were just thinking that they could force out the government because they did get the military on their side. They do have a sort of a primitive air force, but nothing like the Saudis have. The Saudis have American equipment. They buy from us the most sophisticated equipment in the world. So I don't think they ever thought that the Saudis would come in. I think they thought that they would chase out the government, they would take control and begin to run the place.
Do you think they're going to limit this operation to just airstrikes for now?
Well, I think so right now, because you put ground forces in, then you can suffer a lot of casualties, and it's a much different thing. As you know, the United States found out when we went into Iraq, if you compare that, say, to the first Gulf War, we just got in, threw the Iraqis out, and got out, and mainly we bombed for 37 days before we sent the ground forces in back in the first Gulf War. So no, it's much more difficult when you take the next step.
Hey, Larry, I'm going to ask you to speculate here. We're hearing that over 10 nations are involved in this military operation. Any idea what countries might be involved and what their roles might be?
Well, again, it might be like some of the people who were bombing with us and the Saudis in Syria. The United Arab Emirates, could provide some aircraft. I think the others may be providing bombs. They may have some intelligence. I don't know if they have people on the ground there. But as I look at it so far, it seems like mainly moral support that they're providing, because in terms of a military operation, they don't need many more air forces.
Larry, how do you see things developing? How long do you see these airstrikes going on for?
Well, I think that's the big question. I mean, how long will they be willing to do it? Maybe a week or so before they begin to see some results. If they don't, or the Houthis take other action, or Iranian, proxies decide to do something, then that will be the key question. But I think they're hoping, as we would use the term, shock and awe to begin with, to get their attention, and then, be able to come to some sort of power-sharing arrangement.
And if they don't acquiesce and go back to the negotiating table, then what? Then we're in this full-on proxy war, a regional war, perhaps, Larry?
Well, yes, you can, and yes, you could. As I say, wars are very easy to start. They're much more difficult to stop, because then you don't want to lose face or look weak. And if the Houthis can hold out, then the next step is what do the Saudis do? Do they increase the air campaign? Do they send in ground troops? And, you know, basically, do they want to fight an insurgency and, you know, sort of intercity war, as we saw in Tikrit? It's much easier said than done.
Larry, thank you very much as ever. Lawrence Korb is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense there in Washington, D.C.